I've removed the rear wheel from the bicycle, and specifically what I'm interested in is this 5-speed sprocket. I'm interested in the smallest gear on that sprocket, and coupled that with the largest gear on the front end of the bicycle, on the crankset, I should get a gearing up of around about 3 to 3.25 revs per revolution of the crankset, which will obviously increase the torque I'm having to put onto the drum. The other thing I'm going to try, first of all, is to detach the whole of this freewheel hub from the wheel and attach the whole thing onto the pulley of the washing machine. Now, this has come out through a conversation I had with some undergraduate students in the University of Texas, and I was arguing for a fixed wheel type connection, so no freewheel sprocket. But just as an exercise, I thought it might be worthwhile trying to get this hub to fit onto the pulley and seeing if it will work, and see whether I can get the freewheel facility, because it will mean that I could leave it to slow down naturally rather than using the braking effort of my legs, as would normally happen with the washing machine at the moment. So this is the first stage. So what I'm going to have to do, take the spokes off, let's get the hub out, and I shall have to detach it from the rest of the assembly of the wheel. So I think there might be a bit of grinding or a bit of hacksawing to do that. Be a bit brutal, but it doesn't matter. It's done its purpose as a wheel, so now I'm going to use this 5-speed sprocket. Now I've got the one half of the spokes off, I'm going to take these off that go onto the hub, and I'm going to grind onto these because I can't get cutters in close enough. I could use a hacksaw, but I think I'm going to be brutal and grind them out. Let's have a look. I dressed off the ends of the spokes with the grinder and was able to remove everything, so it's nice and clean now. I've got a nice functioning freewheel 5-speed sprocket and a collection of spokes. But yeah, we're ready to go with the next stage now. I now have the threaded bar for the acting as the spindle on the bicycle, which is a 10mm diameter threaded bar, and there we are. Nice little action there, so that's going to work. The problem is that I have to put, instead of having the wheel behind me, I'm going to need it in front of me effectively, because that's where I want my drum to be. This is because I'm going to have, that would give me a short chain length rather than a much longer chain length than convention allows, and that means less risk of the chain slipping off the cog. To do that, I've got to effectively move that to the front, but keeping the orientation the same. So the gear will be assembled to the front like that, and that will mean when I pedal in the conventional sense, this is going to turn in a similar sense, because if it went the other way it would freewheel. So that's what I've got to do. So I've got to make this go into the pulley shaft of the spin dryer or the washing machine. The problem is it's only an 8mm diameter bolt, So what I'm going to need to do, I can put a thread on that, but I need to bring it down in diameter. And to do that, I'm going to have to take some of the meat off here. And I'm going to use this woodworking lathe that I made to hold it in place while I take off some of that surplus metal. Now I'll bring it down to the best size to run a die down that to make an 8mm thread. And then we should be able to assemble it to the drum. So here's the spindle in the chuck of the lathe, and I've made a little mark there. That's where I want to go up to. Now I'm going to be quite crude with this because I'm going to use an angle grinder to rip this thread down. It's not what I would normally advocate. I'd use a metal turning tool if I had one, but I haven't, so I'm just going to grind it off. Right, so I've just ground off most of the thread there, and this is the washer that was on the 8mm bolt. That's pretty good as a go gauge, if you like, to check it out. So I ought to be able now to run a die down this and cut the 8mm thread to fit on there. I had to file a little lead in for the die to fit on the end of the bar, but it's cutting the thread now. I've got it clamped between two pieces of wood so it doesn't damage the existing 10mm thread in the vise, and it is quite a tight cut. But take it easy, keep it lubricated, and we'll get there in the end. That's it. That's the thread cut all the way down, certainly as far as I want to go. So we're ready to try it on the drum and see how the assembly looks. Make sure it's nice and central, and it runs concentrically. 10mm, 8mm. There we are, mounted onto the drum. We've got a nice one-way drive mechanism, and we're going the right way, because if I'm pedalling from the other side, this will be going the correct way. So that's it. We've got a 5-speed freewheel hub onto the spin dryer. So what I've got to do now is put this onto the pallet and the bicycle alongside it, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's worked out very well. It doesn't seem to have any run out on the gear, and of course with a smaller diameter gear the run out is not going to be as important as if it was a large gear. So I think we'll be okay with that. So here's my drum. I've got it out on a workmate. Now the problem that I've got with it is that although I've got two faces on here to which I can attach some fitting bolts, the problem is that trying to get this in the right position so that I can get the thicknesses measured and everything square, it's not really possible because it rocks. You can see that the heights here are different, so I want to try and get everything into one standard plane. Now normally this would obviously be in the casing of the washing machine, but because it was so badly corroded I couldn't use it. It was structurally imperfect, so that's why it's taken out. Otherwise keep it in the chassis as much as you can. Now the only solution I came up with for this was, instead of trying to measure things, it was unstable, I couldn't get any good datum reference, was to use a little engineering design trick, which is look at it from every angle. And I realised that if I turn the whole thing upside down, and just support the lid on two flat planks so as to avoid the catch that's here. I have a nice level surface from which to get my data. So I now have these two fixing points, which are slotted to take the bolts, are now parallel to the surface here because the lid is parallel to these, and I can now start to get my reference points to anchor the drum to the pallet. The other thing that's of note here is that when I removed the drum, the rubber tube, drain tube, was damaged. So looking back through my waste stuff, I have here a very handy vacuum cleaner hose, and it turns out to be a dead fit for the outlet from the drum. So as there's no problem in it doing anything except lying on the floor and draining, I don't even need to worry about being able to attach it because I just want the water to run away. So there's a nice solution straight away, matching diameter. In fact, I'm not really worried about how watertight it is, but it should be fine. That's great. What I'll do now is start making the beach supports here and here and bring them all to the same operating level. This is my first plank that I've cut. I've recessed the nut, and the bolt I'm using is the one that came originally off the drum. So that's one of the drum anchoring bolts. So I'm just using the same thing again. So nicely flanged nut there, very, very useful. Spreads the load over a plastic flange quite nicely. So jolly useful to recuperate. Okay, so we're on the wooden supports now. So that's going to be good and solid, and I can attach this to the pallet. What I would like to do is also put a bracket from up here down to the pallet. That will make it stiffer still, and I'm going to come off these stubs that we used for the shock absorbers, which sat on there, and they were screwed on to hold them in place. Now obviously I've discarded those because we've got no chassis, but what I've done is I've drilled this out to accommodate a 6mm tap, which I have here, and now which I'm going to just cut a thread into here without going through the drum, and just cut a thread in so that I can attach my little horizontal plank, which will then go down to the pallet. Now it's a bit crude, but I've got plenty of pallet wood, so I'll just get it tapped in. Do the other one. There's plenty of meat here, so I'm sure it'll be mechanically strong enough. If it can be suspended on the shock absorbers, I'm sure it can take a 6mm bolt down there. As I say, there's plenty of good plastic there for it to bite into. So I'll do the second one, and then we'll attach our piece of wood. That's it screwed in. I've decided to put one on the other elevation as well. Might be belt and braces, but if I do need to, if I do think I'm getting unnecessary twist on this, I can put another vertical brace down to the pallet. I think I'm ready to put this onto the pallet now. So I'll start to get everything lined up and take off the surplus planking there, get the wood off there. I'll saw that off, bearing in mind that when I do finally attach it to the pallet, I will need slots in the lowest support so that I can move the drum to and fro so that I can get the chain tension correct. But yeah, that's good. Nice and solid, well supported, and without that horrible rusty casing on it. I now have the bicycle mounted onto the pallet in the position that I want, and I've tidied up all the supports on the drum so that now it is rigid with respect to the pallet. I've also reinforced the pallet at this midsection because here it's quite a long distance between the two supports that were already there, so I've put another one halfway along the pallet plank length. This is a slightly oversized pallet than normal, and the planks are therefore flexing in the centre part between the two wooden blocks, so I've just added another pair of wooden blocks to support it. I'm now ready to put the drum fixed to the pallet, but to do this I will need adjustment so that my chain tension can be altered. So when I put it onto here, I'm going to slot 2 holes which are going to give me enough fore and aft movement to accommodate the chain adjustment that I need. Now the chain is not the same length as originally, so I am going to have to put in an extra possibly 20 centimeters of chain to get it to go the full length of the circuit. But it's coming together, and it won't be long now before I can do the test run. Okay, so I'm ready now to cut the slots. I've already pierced the holes, so let's just go into this. So there is the drum mounted on the 2 slotted holes. So what I'm going to do is first of all reinforce the pallet underneath here with some more of my handy wooden pallet blocks, these chaps, and I shall put a plank right the way across the pallet to reinforce the whole of the elevation, and then I will have to put 2 more slotted bolt holes as I did here. I've just done the washing cycle. I've drained it after rinsing, and I've spun it at about 100 RPM, so the washing has been clinging to the drum walls and draining, but with this you can see there's still quite a lot of water in there, so let's go and try it in the spin dryer.
Contact.
Right, so now I'll stop pedalling. As you can see, there's quite a lot of run on this, and as a safety measure I believe I'm going to put in one of these brake blocks from the bicycle to run against the pulley, so in case an acts of emergency we can actually put a brake on quite quickly. So it will probably be a simple lever that I can pull across and just pull it on, but there's that much momentum in this and such a high speed, comparative speaking, I would like to be able to stop it reasonably quickly. let's have a look at how our spin drying cycle has worked. Oh, that feels good. Let's try and fish out the really wet jumper. Oh, you saw what it was like before. And now there appears to be, it's damp but it ain't wet, so that can go on the line with no worries at all. Oh, here's another one, same, nothing in that. I don't want to wring it because I don't want to destroy the fabric, but nevertheless,
my only organic jumper.
Yeah, well, organic or no, it's now been spun organically. Brilliant.
So, no more wet washing.
Hurrah! And next comes the pedal powered tumble dryer. Watch this space ...